Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to the studio. Let's walk through our slab throwing hybrid system. This is a hybrid system that allows you to throw slab on wheel to get really beautiful vertical forms. So there is a ring that comes with our hybrid system, and that is a ledge that keeps your slab in place while you're manipulating the clay. And we also have our wheel bar. If you have our trimming chuck system, you already have this bar. If not, this bar does come in our combination. Make sure your wheel is free of any debris. We don't want anything throwing our pot out of balance. And you will want to just match up the notches to the wheel bar, easy peasy. It will automatically center the system for you. We recommend 3 to 4 lugs of clay for the size of this system on your wheel. This will help to keep your form in place while you are putting outward pressure as we're building our slab up. Without this step, you could have a system that is very loose and the pressure that you're putting on would possibly knock it off of the wheel, and we don't want that. Use fresh clay. Fresh clay is best for our lugs, so it'll keep it nice and snug. So I'm going to grab a 3/8 slab of clay that I've already rolled out, and I've used our templates online to cut out this form. Corn starching is still a must. Even though we are wheel throwing this slab, we still want to make sure that the slab of clay will release easily when we're all finished with our form. As usual, we will cut beveled cuts to fit in the seam. The beautiful thing about this hybrid system is that we will almost completely disappear the seam as we're working the clay up and smoothing it, which makes this look like a wheel thrown form, but with the ease of hand building. And you can also get great height to this. This form here is almost 5.5 inches tall. So we are able to, without having to punish our bodies with centering big amounts of clay, you are able to get taller forms more evenly. I am going to dry fit and then button this up with a slip and score. I score my 2 beveled edges and I use a vinegar slip in my studio. It's just straight up distilled vinegar with a little bit of my clay body in. At this point, we still want to make sure that we are not introducing moisture in between the hybrid form and our clay. So we want to keep that nice and dry in there for ease of release on this. I am finding that this system is really ergonomic. If you have issues with wrist or shoulders in the centering process, you're skipping the centering step while still creating a wheel thrown form, which makes it really easy if you are needing to have special adjustments for that, like I do. And it is really great for getting nice, even walls, top and bottom. I have an Instagram reel that shows when I cut these forms how even the walls are because we're starting with a uniform slab. So I'll come through with my red rib or sometimes a metal rib here, and I'll just start the process of flattening out our seam. I'm just scraping off any extra clay, creating a little bit of a flat spot there. You'll see as I start turning the wheel, there is a little bit of a bump where the seam is. So we are going to do the most work on the seam and on the top of this form. Now, our hybrid forms you are throwing your form upside down. So the top part that you see here, we will actually be attaching the foot to, and the bottom part that's making contact with that sleeve is going to be the drinking rim. So I'm taking a sponge. You do not want to add a lot of water. This is not the same as a wheel thrown piece in the way of with a slab, you do not want to add a lot of extra moisture. So I am wetting the sponge, I'm wringing out any extra water, and I'm going to take that sponge from the bottom to the top, making sure that I am not introducing a lot of moisture. We don't want to make our slab weak. So as I go through, I'm going to stop the wheel and flatten out the seam a little bit more. I do this 2 to 3 times to make sure that I'm absolutely disappearing the seam. It is really, really, really easy to work with this slab of clay on our wheel because we have that inside form that's giving us counter pressure. So I'm going to continue to smooth this clay, and really at this point all we are trying to do is work the clay upward evenly. There is a hole in the top, so you can put your hand in to kind of, you're not supporting the clay from the inside, but with a wheel thrown piece, you kind of have that muscle memory of supporting inside and out, and it is helpful to bring the clay up. You can do this as many times as you want to make the form as thin as you want. I am going to stop it again here and continue to flatten my seam. Remember, we want this seam to be completely or as close to invisible at the end as we possibly can. And that's kind of what is unique about the hybrid system, because you can't really tell if it's wheel thrown or hand built, which is great. So let's level off the top. Very carefully take a pin tool, or you can even use a clay knife at this point, and you'll want to level off the top. The top is where we are going to attach the foot. So you want to make sure that's nice and level, so as we attach the foot, we are not having an uneven pot. At this point, I will already score the bottom for the attachment while it's still spinning on the wheel. And you'll see as I bring in my bottom piece, it has to be relatively set up. You don't want any flop to this bottom piece because it will start sagging into the form, and we don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and score this bottom piece while it's turning, and I will also add my slip while it's turning on the wheel. It just makes this step really easy and really quick. Now the bottom I leave a little bit thick if I want to trim. You will see that I can trim this pot right now at the construction phase, which makes it a more streamlined process, and it also makes it a quicker process. Because we didn't use a ton of moisture, this clay is ready to be wet trimmed, what I'm calling it. So I've got it slipped and scored. I'm going to flip my top over. I'm going to dry fit. I have used the bottom cutter that comes with our 5.125 form, which is what I'm using here. And I'm going to go ahead and start to bring a little bit of that top clay down onto the side. Again, we're not adding a lot of moisture here, and I'm not putting a lot of pressure into the center of this foot piece. I'm just really working on the join. So I'm going to wet the clay a little bit. I'm going to start convincing the clay to come down just a little bit. What we're doing here is we're sealing our foot, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start my trimming process. I'm going to start at the lip. I have full access to this pot. Now this is a wet trimming stage, so you will want to stop and clean off your tool. You'll see here the clay is a little sticky, so if it gets caught to the pot, it'll just start kind of spinning around, and then you'll have to, just like I did here, work on getting that piece of clay off so you're not smearing it into your pot. It's just the nature of trimming at this point of wetness, but it has been really amazing for me to trim my pot at the making stage. All I have to do, I was able to finish this pot later on this day. So I was able to construct my pot and finish it all in the same day because of how quickly this constructs. I am going to put a foot into here. So I'm going to do that now. And because my pot is already centered on the wheel, because the clay is not super wet, and because I know the thickness of the foot that I cut out, I know exactly how much clay I can get away with trimming at this point. It has been so much fun to do this step right away, because I've usually had to throw my pot, let it set for a couple days, and then come back and do the trimming, and then do any of my detailing, and then add my handles. But with this hybrid system, I'm able to do almost all of those steps in the same day. So the red rib, a damp sponge, also the metal rib will be your best friend during this construction. Now, I want to say, since this is an intro to our slab throwing hybrid system, that there is some skill involved here. I am a wheel thrower. I am a slab builder. I do have some experience with clay. So there is an understanding of wheel speed. There is an understanding of control. What I really hope for with this system is just to give you a really easy way to make uniform, taller pieces easily. So for releasing, we're going to put downward pressure onto the system, and we are going to use our pointer finger to just slide up that shelf to release. It is so amazing. At this point, if you have your cornstarch, you will have no problems getting your form off. Removing the form from the sleeve is really easy. So what I like to do is just grab a really small wear board, just a little insert, and I'm going to quickly flip this, baker's flip. You're gonna wanna support the green piece and then flip it over. So now we have our piece right side up. You can see we're already trimmed, very lightweight for a hand build. And I'm going to, while my green ring is still attached because it's giving me some surface tension, I'm going to treat my seams. So I'm going to go ahead and seal the seam on the inside where the foot meets the pot. And I'm also going to do some work on that vertical seam. We have done a lot of compression, so that seam is already really tightly closed. We just want to make it look pretty. And off it pops. I put this shelf right back onto our hybrid system so I don't misplace that. Each hybrid form will have its own insert, its own shelf piece for you. So here's some bonus content. I'm going to give you an example of what you can do to alter this form. Because we are still hand building, there's a lot of options that you have for the form. I want to belly out this tall form and leave the top a little bit more narrow and a little more fluted. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to start beveling right near the bottom, not all the way down to the base. There's an example of what I'm going for. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom, and I'm going around with my red rib as I'm spinning the form, just giving regular even pressure. I'll speed this video up for you so we're not sitting here forever while you see me forming this. When I get enough belly at the bottom, I come up and I start forming then on top of that bevel just to bring it into a more tapered form. I will show you how to flute out the drinking lip here just a little bit. I like to use my regular rim cone. So our 5.125 hybrid form will use our regular rim cone. And then I'm just going to gently add pressure to this until my rim is as fluted out as I'd like. Now, the clay is still relatively soft. We are working with a slab of clay, the same wetness that we would at as you would if you were just straight hand building this. So I'm going to come through while my rim cone is in. I'm going to address my rim, making sure it's really smooth, making sure it's nice and even. Because my slab is at a workable state, I'm able to do some of this detailing work right now. This is not something I would be able to do with a wheel thrown vessel because of the moisture content that you introduce when you are throwing pots on the wheel. So we have introduced minimal moisture to this, so we are able to work out some of the details. I'm going to grab my clay knife here. I'm just making sure that my seam is nice and pretty since I did put some pressure on it with our rim cone. And then with the clay knife, I'm going to come through. I'm going to make sure the pot is as centered as best centered as I can at this point. Pro tip, it doesn't have to be absolutely centered if you can keep your elbow anchored and you can keep your hand centered. So do your best with that. So I'm going to come through. I'm going to bevel my drinking lip. At this point, I really want to think about the mouthfeel for this mug. I want it to be nice and smooth. I want it to be not too thick and clunky as someone brings the pot to their mouth to drink their beverage. So I'm going to undercut a little bit on the inside to make sure there's not a big bump there. And then I will come through with a couple, with a finishing sponge to round off the top. You can also use your shark fin at this point. I may do a little more detailing for the rim when my pot is more set up, but for right now, I want to make sure that I'm leaving the rim in really good condition. So if the pot does get away from me, I'm not fighting with that on the back end of it. So this is the form that I was able to throw with our 5.125 slab throwing hybrid system. It's so quick, so easy. It's just a really amazing way to make a pot, a hand-built pot on the wheels. Whether you belly it out or you can leave this form straight up and down and make the classic travel mug that this jig was originally intended for. Please give this a shot. I would love to see what you make. And as always, thanks for spending time.